Fencing can be quite an unequal sport. Some areas have the luxury of large fencing centres with a variety of training partners and coaches. Other areas, sometimes even whole countries, can be described as fencing deserts. Instead of dedicated fencing halls, there are community sports centres or even church halls. A good club in such an area might only even meet twice a week if you're lucky. And if you want to train any more, you probably have to travel maybe quite a considerable distance, maybe a distance that you can't really travel as regularly as you would like to. But this is just the reality of fencing for a lot of people, maybe even most people. And for a recreational fencer who's just happy to make friends and then hit them with a sword, this is fine. But if you're looking to try to become a competitive fencer, to go to competitions and beat people, this can make things a bit more difficult. Now, I know this because this was kind of my situation when I was a young fencer who was trying to keep up with the opposition. I would often go to competitions without really having much fencing or sparring beforehand, and most of the sparring I did have wasn't with people who would push me, who would challenge me, often with beginners, just whoever you can get, really. And then I'd turn up to competitions against, people from the other clubs in their flashy tracksuits, and you can't help but feel like something of an underdog in such a situation. Now, the funny coincidence is that I happen to be a Stoke City fan. And if you follow English football, then you might know a little bit about what that might entail. And as I was starting to compete as a fencer in the 2010s, really, there were parallels that could be made with what Stoke City were doing at the time. Stoke didn't really have a huge budget or reputation to attract expensive, flashy players, but they were able to become a team that was really difficult to play against, to a point that it kind of became a meme that when you were talking about good players like Messi or Ronaldo, you kind of had to ask, could they do it on a rainy Wednesday night in Stoke?
I always felt that Stoke City, under Tony Pulis, would give Barcelona a game.
So I took a lot of inspiration from Stoke City, knowing that even if I might not be able to compete for the titles, I could at least try and ruin someone's day. A lot of Stoke's success came down to this man, Tony Pulis. Pulis was the manager that took Stoke from the second division all the way up to an FA Cup final and even playing in the Europa League. So how can we apply Stoke's success to fencing? Well, I learned a few things. Under Tony Pulis, Stoke were known for having a lot of very tall and athletic players. And the team's strategy was largely based off exploiting this. Not only did this physicality give tactical options to the team, but it also played a part in making other teams terrified to play them.
A cold, windy night away at Stoke is horrific. You just know that you got two meatheads behind you in Hoof and Shawcross. Yeah. That's just gonna welly the boots off you.
Stoke actually got a fair bit of stick for this. People often labelled them a rugby team. Which is fair to some extent, but it kind of reminds me of how when the Koreans started winning, you'd get these old salty Europeans who would dismiss them as just overly reliant on athleticism. Now, as a fencer, you obviously can't make yourself taller, but you can do an awful lot to make yourself more physically imposing. It doesn't matter how difficult your circumstances are. You could be the only fencer in your entire country. You still should be able to work on your fitness and become one of the fittest fencers, even in the world. If you find yourself in such a situation where you don't have so many training partners, your priority should be to get fit. There are tons of resources for this online, and now there's more and more fencing specific strength and conditioning coaches that you can reach out to. So in my opinion, there's really not much of an excuse not to get fit, basically. In football, there are styles of playing that are often glorified, usually about using a lot of quick passing around the pitch to retain possession of the ball. Think of your glamorous sides like Barcelona or Spain or Man City. Stoke were the polar opposite of that.
To hurl it in, goes short across the touchline and it's bundled in!
Stoke's priority was simply not to concede. Doesn't matter if the other team have a ball, we're just going to sit back and defend and wait for our chance. Now, obviously fencing and football are very different games, but I think there is an interesting parallel to be made with possession of a ball in football and right of way in fencing. In football, you generally want possession of a ball in order to score a goal, and in fencing, you generally want the priority in order to score a point. But the thing is, in both these sports, the advantage of possession or priority can be heavily dampened if the opponent has particularly strong defensive capabilities. And in fencing, having strong defence can take the pressure off winning the middle, which then in turn actually makes it easier to win in the middle of a piece. And the great thing about defence is that even if you are training in a less competitive club with people who don't challenge you so much, you can still put yourself at a disadvantage and work on your defence. An example of a good exercise you can do, even against a relatively weak fencer, is you can just stick your point in line out, right? And see how many disengages, derailments you can get, okay? Even if you're not against a particularly skilled fencer, they can make it hard for you to keep your point in line, right? And even if you do find it easy to go around, make it super tight, okay? This is the kind of thing, right, you'd be doing with a coach anyway if you're in a serious club. So why can't you turn your training partners into your coaches, right? I just think in general, if you're against people who don't challenge you so much, if you work on your defence, you can turn it into more of a challenge. One of Stoke's most legendary players was Rory Delap. Basically, it was discovered that Delap had the most ridiculous ability to throw the ball over huge distances with pinpoint accuracy. This was used to great effect by Tony Pulis using set pieces. In football, a set piece is a choreographed play with the aim of distracting and manipulating the defence in order to create an opening and then exploit it. And I think this kind of thinking can apply to fencing. Think making a big prep to draw an attack on prep and then closing the door with a parry, or maybe faking a pull in order to suck the opponent in and then hit them on prep or counter-attack them. I think there's a lot of these more pre-planned actions that you can work on. As a fencer personally, I tended to struggle more with conventional open eyes fencing. The better fencers just tended to be a bit more patient than I was and a bit more technically efficient than me. So if I tried to play them at the same game, it was never really going to work. So I learned to really pre-plan a lot of my action, which is particularly useful in pool matches for a few reasons. Firstly, you will have the opportunity to watch and analyse your opponents, but also in a match to 5, if you can pull off 2 or even 3 set piece actions, that takes you a long way towards the 5-point target, right? And the beauty of the set piece is that since often it kind of relies on making a mistake as bait, right, as to draw the opponent into doing a particular thing. Now, if you're maybe a bit more of a messy fencer or someone who just happens to make a lot of mistakes like I did, then it makes your traps a lot more believable, right? If you're used to doing silly big preps, when someone sees you do a silly big prep, they're going to go for the attack on prep, and that's where you can go, okay, parry riposte. So you can turn this weakness into an advantage, and it works particularly well against someone who might be underestimating you. In sport, whilst there is no single right way of doing things, there are some ways of playing the game that are glorified and some ways that are derided, regardless of their actual efficiency. As an athlete, you really have to just let go of what people think of you. Just focus on doing what works. And when I say what works, I mean what works for you. We can't all be Aaron Silagi or Osanguk. That's kind of what makes these guys so special. Now, under Tony Pulis, Stoke were often derided for the way that they played. But ultimately, this was one of the most successful periods in the club's history. So does it really matter? As a fencer, you want to be the guy that no one really wants to fence in a competition. And if you let other people determine too much how you're going to fence, you can often end up being a bit of a cookie cutter fencer that is quite easy for someone to suss out at a certain level. My advice would be have an identity and embrace it. Another one of the things I've learned is that often it's actually better to do the wrong thing with conviction than the right thing but without enough belief. Part of what made Stoke such a difficult team to play, particularly when they played at home, was the reputation and the fear that the visiting teams would feel when they arrived at the Britannia Stadium. And fencing is also a very psychological game, and I think a lot of people neglect this mental side. It's normal to be anxious or nervous or stressed. You just have to remember that if you are stressed, then there's a good chance that your opponent is also. And especially if you're fencing someone, the person opposite you is meant to beat you. If you're fencing someone who is supposedly better than you, then really you have to see that the pressure's on them, right? They're going to be a lot more upset by losing than you are. So if you are feeling stressed or scared or anxious, it doesn't matter. That's normal. But what you can do is you look in the eyes of your opponent, okay? And if you can find even just a shred of fear, just a little ounce of doubt in their mind, of they're thinking, what if I lose? Just cling on to that, okay? Really feed off that. Feed off their negativity and let that empower you. And if you don't see any fear, if they don't seem, anxious or worried, then they're not ready for you, right? They really should be. And that's where you're going to catch them by surprise. Fencing really is a confidence game. Anyone can beat anyone. The difference between winning and losing is really so small, and you just have to kind of flip that on its head and say, okay, this means, yes, I might be able to lose to anyone, but I can beat anyone anyway. And so you should approach every match knowing that, okay, I'm going to cause this person troubles. Now, to finish this video, I'm just going to say one more thing, and that is maybe at a certain point, this underdog mentality might not be so useful. At a certain point, if you're going for titles, right, you're at that level, you're at that point where, okay, I should be winning things, you have to think a little bit differently. But I think we have to get to that stage first, and maybe that would be for another video. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys. If you want to support the channel, join a Patreon, follow the Instagram. Thanks for watching. Bye.